Boom! We are live on Facebook profile, Facebook fan page, and YouTube. Welcome, 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 one and all, to another edition of the Locked In Stories. Do pop yourself into the chat, say hi, and I shall give you a shout out, or may not give you a shout out, depends on whether you want me to or not. Just say hi anyway. Well, hello there, old bean. How are you, Eamon, on my main profile? Yes, you are on my main profile. Let's just turn this mic up slightly. There we go. Perfect. I hope we're all rested, we're all great, and we are all safe, first and foremost. I was supposed to be outside with the missus right now to have a look at the line of satellites going across at about 9:30. But I think, I thought, no, you know what? The only stars in my eyes are you lot. And I'd rather be here looking at you lot. Through this lens. How corny. I know. So come on, jump on in. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And if you are watching on YouTube, do click that bell icon to be notified when I'm next live or when I post a video. Wasn't on yesterday because literally I had read every single day live for 15 days. Was it 15? 16 days. 16 days I had read live. And it sort of caught up with me a little bit, and I thought, you know what? Take a day off just to recuperate, because I started to feel a bit lethargic, and I thought, okay, I know I'm not doing full-length reads every single day for the entire day, so it's only once a day. Let's have a look at... Oh, you did the COVID haircut today, Eamon, did you? A full bald head, so you look a bit like my dad. Or do you mean that you've shaped it with a bowl in preparation for... I've tried styling mine a little bit, so it doesn't look too bad. But, yeah, you know, one of those things. I can't believe these people over... is it? I can't remember where it is. But they're legitimately wanting the lockdown to end so they can get a haircut. Okay. Must be in case the TV thinks they look nice. I'm just waiting now for a few more to come on before I start the 17th story, which is the white snakes, I believe. The last story we done a couple of days ago was it the Snake and Leaves? About a princess that would only marry if, when she died, the husband went with her, whether he was alive or not. And he was basically sentenced to death in her... sentenced to death. He was sentenced to death in her tomb, where he had to sit with a very limited amount of bread, and he seen snakes coming through and ended up chopping up the snake, and then another one came out with leaves and put leaves over the snake, which brought it back to life. He then brought her back to life, and then she... Hold on, I'm going to get confused here. I can't remember. Look up the previous video. It was interesting. It did have a few twists and turns. So yeah, do check that one out. It was bizarre, like most of them. Like, share, subscribe, please, and pop onto the chat. Let me know you are here. I am monitoring, but everything seems to be delayed when I'm doing things. And then once we are sorted, oh, you look more like Tommy Shelby. Okay, fair enough. Oh, you know what? I checked the book. And you know what story is in 3 stories' time? It's another big one. Cinderella. Cinderella. I just remember the mice. The mice from Cinderella who done her gown from the movie. I very much doubt it's going to be anything like that, judging by Hansel and Gretel and Rapunzel. But we shall see. It is intriguing. For those that don't know who I am, my name's Chris Kendall. I'm a professional British voiceover. And what I'm doing is I bought myself a gorgeous book called Brothers Grimm, Complete Fairy Tales. And it's all the fairy tales that you may have come to know and love, completely torn apart, and the original German texts, which is not read in German, so don't worry about that. It is read in old translated English. And I have, and to make things a bit more of a challenge, I have not read any of these stories prior to reading them live to you. So it's just as much of an excitement, as you can tell, and much of a shock to me to read them to you guys, because I'm learning them and hearing the stories for the first time myself as well. So yeah, there might be some hiccups during the read. Bear in mind this is live and it's not a recorded session, so I can't edit it out. And you know what? I don't care. I don't care. At the end of the day, you guys enjoy it. It is a genuine bedtime story for some. And so yeah, and so far, it's been really entertaining. I had to put that it was parental guidance simply because some of the stories do contain death and some gore and some blood and what have you, which may not be suitable for children. However, we shall now get started on story number 17. The White Snake. I hope this is not a euphemism. A long time ago, there lived a king who was famed for his wisdom through all the land. Nothing was hidden from him, and it seemed as if news of the most secret things was brought to him through the air. But he had a strange custom. Every day after dinner, when the table was cleared and no one else was present, a trusty servant had to bring him one more dish. It was covered, however, and even the servant didn't know what was in it, nor did anyone know, for the king never took off the cover to eat until he was quite alone. This had gone on for a long time, when one day the servant who took away the dish was overcome with such curiosity that he could not help carrying the dish into his room. When he carefully locked the door, he lifted up the cover and saw a white snake lying on the dish. But when he saw it, he could not deny himself the pleasure of tasting it. I suppose opening it's one thing, but tasting it's a different. And what you do behind closed doors. So he cut off a little bit and put it into his mouth. No sooner had it touched his tongue, than he heard a strange whispering of little voices outside his window. He went and listened, and then noticed that it was the sparrows who were chattering together, and telling one another of all kinds of things that they had seen in the fields and woods. Eating the snake had given him a power of understanding the language of animals. Now it so happened that on this very day the queen lost her most beautiful ring. A suspicion of having stolen it fell upon this trusty servant, who was allowed to go everywhere. The king ordered the man to be brought before him, and threatened with angry words that unless he could before the morrow point out the thief, he himself should be looked upon as guilty and executed. In vain he declared his innocence. he was dismissed with no better answer. In his trouble and fear, he went down to the courtyard and thought about how to help himself out of trouble. Now some ducks were sitting together quietly by a brook and taking their rest. And while they were making their feathers smooth with their bills, they were having a confidential conversation together. The servant stood by and listened. They were telling one another of all places where they had been waddling about that morning, and what good food they had found, and one said, in a pitiful tone, "Something lies heavy in my stomach. As I was eating in haste, I swallowed a ring which lay under the queen's window." The servant at once seized it by the neck, carried her to the kitchen, and said to the cook, "Here is a fine duck, pray kill her." "Yes," said the cook, and weighed her in his hands. "She has spared no trouble to fatten herself, and has been waiting to be roasted long enough." So he cut off her head, and she was being dressed for the spit. The queen's ring was found inside her. The servant could now easily prove his innocence, and the king, to make amends for his wrong, allowed him to ask a favour. To make amends for the wrong, allowed him to ask a favour, and promised him the best place in the court that he could wish for. The servant refused everything, and only asked for a horse and some money for travelling, as he had mind to see the world and go about a little. When his request was granted, he set out on his way, and one day came to a pond, where he saw 3 fishes caught in reeds and gasping for water. Now, though it is said that fishes are mute, he heard them lamenting that they must perish so miserably, and, as he had a kind heart, he got off his horse and put the 3 prisoners back into the water. They quivered with delight, put out their heads, and cried to him, We will remember you and repay you for saving us." He rode on, and after a while it seemed to him that he heard a voice in the sand at his feet. He listened, and heard an ant-king complain. "Why cannot folks with their clumsy beasts keep off our bodies? That stupid horse with heavy hoofs has been treading down on my people without mercy." So the servant turned on to a side path, and the ant-king cried out to him, "We will remember you. One good turn deserves another." The path led him into the wood, and here he saw 2 old ravens standing by their nest and throwing out their young ones. "Out with you, you idle, good-for-nothing creatures!" cried they. "We cannot find food for you any longer. You are big enough and can provide for yourselves." But the poor young ravens lay upon the ground, flapping their wings and crying, "Oh, what helpless chicks we are! We must shift for ourselves, and yet we cannot fly. What can we do but lie here and starve?" So the good young fellow alighted and killed his horse with his sword. And gave it to them for food. Then they came hopping up to it, satisfied their hunger, and cried, "We will remember you. One good turn deserves another." Surely that would be counteracted by killing your own horse. Okay. And now he had to use his own legs, see? And when he walked a long way, he came to a large city. There was a great noise and crowd in the streets, and a man rode up on horseback crying aloud, "The king's daughter wants a husband, but whoever pursues her hand must perform a hard task. And if he does not succeed, he will forfeit his life." Many had already made the attempt, but in vain. Nevertheless, when the youth saw the king's daughter, he was so overcome by her great beauty that he forgot all danger, went before the king, and declared himself a suitor. So he was led out to sea, and a gold ring was thrown in his sight. Then the king... And a gold ring was thrown in his sight. Then the king ordered him to fetch this ring up from the bottom of the sea, and added, "If you come up again without it, you will be thrown in again and again until you perish among the waves." All the people grieved for the handsome youth. Then they went away, leaving him alone by the sea. What nice villagers. My back's a bit sore. Then they went. He stood on the shore and considered what he should do, when suddenly he saw 3 fishes come swimming towards him. And they were the very fishes whose lives he saved. The one in the middle held a mussel in his mouth, which it laid on the shore at the youth's feet, and when he had taken it upon himself to open it, there lay the gold ring in the shell. Full of joy he took it to the king, and expected that he would grant him the promised reward. But when the proud princess perceived that it was not equal in birth, that he was not her equal in birth, she scorned him, and required him to first perform another task. She went down into the garden and strewed with her own hands 10 sacks full of millet seeds on the grass. Then she said, "Tomorrow morning before sunrise these must be picked up, with not a single grain missing." The youth sat down in the garden and considered how it might be possible to perform this task. But he could think of nothing, and there he sat sorrowfully awaiting the break of day, when he should be led to death. But as soon as the first rays of sun shone in the garden, he saw all 10 sacks standing side by side, quite full, and not a single grain was missing. The ant king had came in the night with thousands and thousands of ants, and the grateful creatures had by great industry picked up all the millet seed and gathered them into the sacks. Presently the king's daughter herself came down into the garden, and was amazed to see that the young man had done the task she had given him. But she could not yet conquer her proud heart, and said, "Although he has performed both tasks, he shall not be my husband until he has brought me an apple from the tree of life." She doesn't want much, does she? The youth did not know where the tree of life stood, but he set out, and he would have gone on forever, as long as his legs would carry him, though he had no hope of finding it. After he wandered through the 3 kingdoms, he came one evening to a wood, and lay down under a tree to sleep. But he heard a rustling in the branches, and a golden apple fell into his hand. At the same time 3 ravens flew down to him, perched themselves upon his knee, and said, "We are the 3 young ravens whom you saved from starving. When we had grown big and heard you were seeking the golden apple, we flew over the sea to the end of the world, where the tree of life stands, and have brought you the apple." The youth, full of joy, set out homewards, took the golden apple to the king's beautiful daughter, who had no more excuses left to make. They cut the apple of life in 2 and ate it together. And then their heart became full of love for him. And then her heart became full of love for him, and they lived undisturbed. They lived in undisturbed happiness to a great age. If I found a golden apple, I most certainly wouldn't be giving it to a princess. I'd go and sell it, or maybe keep it, or maybe have it as an heirloom. I don't know. A lot of work for someone that didn't even want to be with you. I don't know. So that was the white snake, who technically only appeared at the very beginning of the story. That one was a little bit more finished, but it seemed still a little bit too rushed. What are your thoughts? How did you find that? Oh, what's happened to me live? There we are. We're disappeared again. Nope. Okay. We're just more of an observant crowd tonight. Fair enough. Well, okay. Thank you very much to everyone that has joined in. I do hope you enjoyed that story. And do tune in tomorrow at 9:30 at the same time when we shall be reading the next story. Story number 18, which will be The Straw, the Coal, and the Bean. No idea what it's going to be. Anyway, take care, be safe, enjoy the rest of your night, and thank you for joining and listening.